We're going live, and once again, surprise factor. Fortunately, we're showing my screen, but let's say hi to our guest, Karen. Hi, Karen.
Hey.
So we were having a nice little chuckle here before we got started, which is how we always like to start things off anyway. So that's it's par for the course. Speaking of par, it was a great golf today, but we won't go off on a tangent. So I'm Heidi Hanna, as it shows there right in front of your face. And this is the first ever Beyond Funny broadcasting webisode. I'm here with my very dear friend, Karen Buxman, who I will be sharing more about here in a moment. But basically, my goal for putting this together is yet to be determined. I wanted to get together with some of my funny friends and talk a little bit about the health benefits of humor with no particular attachment to the outcome, which is a practice in itself, something that I've been working on. So this is something that I want to explore, and I knew that the first person I wanted to start with would be my dear friend Karen. Just to give you a little bit of background about Ms. Buxman, she has written 6 books, which is the last that her bio at least will admit to. It's probably more than that. I happen to know she's working on a 7th because I'm helping her write her 7th book. Not that we're keeping track. We are excited to be announcing for the first time that we are working on the book together. So stay tuned for more information about that. Karen is also in the National Speakers Association Hall of Fame, which is quite an honor. She is a board member and past president of the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor. Yes, there's a group of us nerds who get together and talk about the health benefits of humor, and I'm sure many of you are joining us by watching the recording of today's talk. Part of my reason for putting this all together is part of what I'm calling the Beyond Funny Project. And Beyond Funny Project has all sorts of different elements to it as part of my project for Humor Academy, which is actually affiliated with the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor. And if you want more information on that, both Karen and myself would be happy to share it with you. I will also tell you that Karen is the director of training, which is a very big responsibility for Synergy, my company, and she's on our team as a speaker as well as someone to help me get other speakers trained. And another thing we are just now announcing is that we're going to do a speaker workshop together. So we're going to be talking more about that after this call and coming up with dates. So for those of you who are interested in speaking or writing a book or anything of the sort, or just getting together and having a good time and laughing about it, we'll give you that information as well. So with that, I have asked Karen to come on and talk with me about the health benefits of humor. Now, this is quite a feat for her to take on because I know how difficult it is for her to put all of her funny stories into a short time frame, and we're going to try to keep this to no longer than 15 minutes. So I gave her the task of coming up with perhaps what she would consider the top 3 reasons why humor is healthy. And we agreed that this would just be kind of a starting point for us where we can do future calls talking about some of these in more detail. So with that, Karen, I'm going to turn it over to you, and just what do you want to start us off with?
Sorry, folks, that's all the time we have. No, tell me more about me. Tell me. So I have been researching this field for 25 years. And so I thought a lot about this when you asked me this question, Heidi. And so what I want to do is I want to start from like a higher overview so that you and I can come back and go deeper. But the 3 top reasons why humor is so helpful, particularly in terms of health, is that the functions are the psychological function, the social function, and the physiological effects. And so let's take a look at each one of those to begin with. First of all, the psychological function of humor is that it is a healthy coping mechanism. And this is unlike a lot of other coping mechanisms that people have, because some of us have been known to cope with things like eating or drinking or working too much or throwing yourself into things. And so this is something that really does help people psychologically. So a couple of the things it does is to decrease anxiety and to decrease stress. And you, who are the queen of knowing all about stress, and with your book Stressaholic, you understand just how negatively stress can impact people holistically in terms of their health. It's not just your mental health that's in danger. Just because this is a psychological function doesn't mean that it can't help you physically. And it helps people express anger in a socially acceptable way. So again, people who have anger issues, this is another way of kind of releasing the anger. So psychologically, healthy coping mechanism. Socially is the fact that one of the functions of humor is that it strengthens relationships. Victor Borg is often quoted that laughter is the shortest distance between two people. But humor really does have a bonding effect, and businesses understand this. They understand that if they have more fun, that they're going to bond with their customers, that their staff is going to bond, and so this is really good. And in your book, Stressaholic, you also pointed out the crippling effect of people who are isolated. And I was trying to recall the piece that you mentioned, but it was like, for somebody who's incredibly isolated, that was the equivalent of like smoking 18 cigarettes a day or something like that, as I recall.
I was talking about that in an interview today, actually, where we were talking about stress, and it's an inflammatory response. So I don't remember the number, but when you think about smoking, we know is obviously really bad for our health and is inflammatory, but the brain perceives social isolation as being just as dangerous because we don't have people to depend on. And as you know, Karen, and part of what we'll be sharing in the book, that was a huge piece for me personally as to why I started researching humor in the first place. I just knew something in my course said you need to laugh more, and I just started searching out ways, like meeting you, to figure out how to actually do that. So I think that social impact is interesting. And I want to go back, if you don't mind, I'm going to interrupt you. If you don't mind, I'm calling the shots here. So you can talk, but the camera's on me. No, you said something psychologically about angry, an angry coping mechanism, which sounds kind of funny. But that's also one of the ways that we can kind of communicate and relate with one another. And do you ever see any instances where that can turn into a negative or be even more stressful? Because, I talked to a doctor friend of mine recently who said that a lot of her patients who use humor are using it to mask things that are going on. And so potentially she saw it as kind of a negative. So I know that's probably a whole other topic, but anything kind of.
Yeah, I'll go into this very briefly, but you're right. I think we should spend another whole Google Hangout on this, because there are different kinds of humor, and there's humor that's affiliative humor, there's humor that's hostile humor, and there's humor that is kind of a softer hostile humor where, maybe you tease somebody and kind of get them motivated to do something. But humor that's really hostile, when somebody's really angry and putting someone else down, this is not what we call therapeutic at all, and it's certainly not therapeutic for the recipient, but I don't think it's even that therapeutic for the person who is sharing that humor. And so many times what it can do, though, is open the door to a further conversation, which might be more therapeutic, with the patient who, the doctor comes in and says, because of your diabetes, we're going to have to look at, possibly, cutting off your foot or something. And if the person says, hostily, oh, well, you're probably going to cut off the wrong leg, ha, 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 and they're putting the doctor down. But then that lets the doctor know, is there some fear about what I'm capable of doing? So definitely in terms of
know those different styles of humor and actually how to approach them if it's masking something. Interesting.
Right. Yeah, so really, really great point. So psychologically, socially, bonding effect, and this is why, people often congregate, have fun, play together, with groups, comedy clubs, those are ways that you can bond. But even in just, one of the top 3 qualities that somebody looks for in terms of a soulmate when they're on Match.com is sense of humor. We know that is something that can create not only a team effect or a community effect in a group, but it can create intimacy in terms of relationships. And so psychologically, socially, and then and then again, we're going to have to spend several times on this one, is the physiological effects.
I have so many notes. I'm trying to keep up. Okay, keep up.
The physiological effects of humor are just so abundant. And I think probably the easiest framework to look at this would be from the viewpoint of psychoneuroimmunology, spelled like it sounds. And that is that in psychoneuroimmunology, we know that under stress, that every single body system is affected. I mean, you know this, and you teach this, and you talk about this. And what we're finally showing with the research is that humor and laughter, now those are two separate issues, but they also have a sweet spot in between, that they also affect every body system that we've looked at so far. Maybe, I don't know about skeletal, but definitely skeletal muscular. And so, you know, I'm not going to go into all of these because we don't have enough time. But in terms of the cardiovascular, very, very cool things that we've discovered about this. And in my book, What's So Funny About Heart Disease, Dr. Michael Miller, who is an expert cardiologist in Baltimore, and he has a new book that's out that's a delightful read. I think it's called something like Heal Your Heart. I feel badly that I don't have that memorized and right in front of me. But what he found was that people who purposefully used humor on a regular basis, and this wasn't even laughter, he was looking at humor, who integrated humor on a regular basis, started increasing the elasticity of the endothelial lining of their blood vessels. And for lay persons, what that means is your blood vessels get stretchier, which means your blood pressure gets lower, you know, in times of stress. And the other piece is, in terms of inflammation, and you talked about inflammation a moment ago, but while stress increases the body's inflammation, humor decreases the cortisol or decreases the inflammatory effect. And one of the reasons we lay plaque down in our blood vessels is because of inflammation. So I don't think there's been any studies done on this yet, but my hypothesis is if we had less inflammation in our bodies, we'd probably have less plaque in our circulatory system. So the cardiovascular system is highly important. And then in terms of endocrine system, we see lots of hormonal changes, but I also especially want to point out, because you know, heart disease is one of the #1 killers, and also the fact that 1 in every 10 persons has diabetes. They don't all know it, but, and this is projected by 2050 to be 1 in 3. And the reason I bring that up is because there's been some very exciting research done for those persons who are diabetic or pre-diabetic. They found that in their studies, Dr. Lee Burke and others, that in addition to the lowering of the cortisol, lowering of the bad cholesterol, that it also, in pre-diabetics and diabetics, not normal people, but in those two groups, it lowered their blood glucose, which is an issue for people with diabetes. And also it lowered renin and angiotensin. And these are proteins and hormones in the body that in a person with diabetes could potentially cause kidney disease or long-term renal issues, which are often complications of diabetes. And so we find, watching the clock here, is that every single body system is affected. My favorite, musculoskeletal, because so many of us, I mean, there's probably not a person watching this that hasn't at some point in time had tight shoulder, tight neck, tight jaw, TMJ, white knuckle grip of the steering wheel. And the nice thing about, you know, humor and laughter is that it causes the constriction or tightening of the muscles and then the relaxation, which is why, you know, people have to bend over after a good laugh, or they have diminished pain because there's less muscle tension. So those are the 3 primary areas that I would say, psychologically, socially, and physiologically. These are the reasons why humor contributes to our health.
Take a breath, Karen.
Not that I get excited about this stuff, right?
So I forgot to mention that Karen is also an RN. She's a registered nurse, and it probably became obvious to you when she said it's my favorite system, because I don't know a lot of people who have a favorite system. Apparently not musculoskeletal, whatever. Not my favorite system, but she's got a system. So I know that was very stressful for you to try to get all of that out there, but I think that makes a lot of sense. And it is amazing how that really fits into our synergy model of looking at energy management holistically, looking at physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, social. And you covered just 3 of those in particular: psychological, social, and physiological, all which are so important to our energy and our resilience and being able to manage stress. And because I happen to know that Karen has a free afternoon, I am going to keep her on for round 2 of this conversation, because I am dying now to have the discussion about humor versus laughter, because that is a big topic and something that originally kind of kept me from wanting to pursue a lot of humor therapy or practical applied humor, is that I'm not a laugher. So I had some resistance to that, and my guess is a lot of people who are going to be watching this webisode will also have some resistance. So Karen, on the spot, are you willing to do round two? We're going to close this up. We're going to give them some ideas of where to get more information, and then we're going to start part two. So those of you who are watching are going to have to come back for that one.
But wait, there's more. Oh, yeah.
But wait, there's more. That's right. So let me give you a couple of really good resources. Number one, the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor is AATH.org, and there's lots of research on there talking about the health benefits of humor. Tons and tons of research in different topics, whether it's humor in the brain or humor in cardiovascular health. Also wanted to mention, of course, you've got our website for Synergy, which is synergyprograms.com, and Karen's bio and speaker video are listed there as well. We also have this project, Beyond Funny, that Karen and I started a couple of years ago, and I'll do a video at some point talking more about that, but the idea behind it was also to do a humor marathon. So we've got some videos there on the website. If you go to synergyprograms.com and follow the link to Beyond Funny, we have some interviews we did, actually some discussions with each other, as well as some other information specifically looking at the impact of humor on the brain, and looking at it as a coping and healing strategy for Alzheimer's, for patients with Alzheimer's as well as caregivers. And Karen was kind enough to share her book. And I don't remember what we ended up in the final. I still consider it Laughing is Better Than Crying. I don't know if that's in the final.
I ended up with If I Didn't Laugh, I'd Cry.
Okay, If I Didn't Laugh, I'd Cry. And actually sometimes both is amazing.
Both are really good for you. It's just that we don't get paid a lot to make people cry.
Right. Job security. Okay, it's 3:30 our time. We're going to wrap this up. We're going to start part two. If you're interested in hearing more about the difference between humor and laughter and why both of them are effective in different ways, you can follow the next link, which will be posted right below this one. So thanks, Karen. Stay tuned, and we will continue our conversation.
Woo-hoo.
Say bye, Karen.
Bye.